Hi, this is Helen from Jupiter's Realm, and today I want to talk about what eclipses mean in astrology. So I'll be looking at how to ascertain if they're likely to affect you personally or not, and if they do, what sort of area of life they might impact. For thousands of years, eclipses have been notable events in cultures all around the world, usually seen as omens of disruptions and sometimes feared, which you can kind of understand from the perspective that the sun and the moon are the most important lights in our sky. They're essential to our existence and the life in general. So any visible changes to these are really notable. In astrology, eclipses are significant events and similarly can portend disruption or changes to the normal flow or pattern of circumstances or events. Eclipses usually occur in pairs of a solar and lunar eclipse, on average every 6 months or so, and these are commonly referred to as eclipse seasons. Eclipses can be partial or total eclipses, and a total eclipse is often seen as more potent or more experientially noticeable than a partial one. This changing of the moon or sun's appearance symbolically represents the obscuration, shift or change regarding what they represent in astrology. And this can bring an unsettled quality to the period or feelings of agitation, disruption or disturbance. So sometimes it can feel a little bit challenging, but it shouldn't be assumed that eclipses necessarily mean something negative. This blocking or eclipsing of the lights and the luminaries can sometimes experientially feel like having to operate in the dark or having to face up to what's hidden, what has previously lain in the shadows. It may not feel easy to determine how to proceed or how to ascertain how things will turn out. So it can be a time to rely more on our intuition, our inner senses, to help us navigate the path forward. The shifts that eclipses can bring can be internal ones, sometimes physical ones, but also changes to external circumstances or events which we are either witness to or directly involved with. A solar eclipse happens at a new moon. The moon is starting a new cycle in relation to the sun, and so this can indicate new beginnings or new patterns of life arising. Sometimes with a solar eclipse it can mean doors opening, but generally that something is shifting or transforming into a new direction, state or quality. A lunar eclipse happens at a full moon, and this often relates to a culmination of events, completions or endings, and may feel very fated or beyond one's normal control. So let's have a quick look at what the sun and moon represent from a traditional perspective as indicators of what it is that's being eclipsed or changed. So the sun's essential significations are rulers, leaders or kings, father figures or other kinds of authority figures, fame and honour, the vital force or spirit or life purpose, lights and illumination and visibility, but also perception and divine wisdom. A lunar eclipse represents the changing of events or patterns relating to mother figures or women leaders, the body and the mind, conception, nurture or marriage, sort of city or state affairs and the common people as opposed to the rulers. The physical world, material possessions, fate and fortune and flux and change. Eclipses can also pertain to the themes of the sign and or houses where the eclipse falls, namely where the moon is, but can also bring in the opposite sign and house too. So for example, if a solar eclipse falls on your 10th house in your birth chart, there may be changes or shifts regarding an authority figure or leader related to work, perhaps your boss, or your own position of authority or status, or some other change relating to work or vocation in life. And then the opposite house, the 4th house of parents, home or living situation may be tied in too, especially when the eclipse then falls in that house and vice versa, as it moves across this axis of signs. Or just to illustrate with another example, let's say the eclipse falls across the Aries-Libra axis, as it's doing this year. This can bring up the theme of the self in relation to others, relationships, and individuality and self-will in relation to collaboration and diplomacy. So shifts that eclipses herald can be around either the topics associated with the luminaries themselves, the sign themes or house topics where the eclipse falls, or a combination of these. Eclipses happen at the nodes, which are the points where the moon and the sun's path intersect. When the luminaries are within 18 degrees of these points, that's when we get an eclipse. And within 10 to 12 degrees is when we get a total eclipse, otherwise it's a partial eclipse with a weaker effect. Now the north node, which is also known as the head of the dragon, can add a pushing, energising forward kind of momentum quality. It can indicate an impulse for gain or accumulation and can sometimes have an obsessive quality to it. The south node, known as the tail of the dragon, symbolises letting go, depletion or dissolution and endings. It can be very spiritualising as it's associated with non-material attachment, but it can also indicate a draining quality. You may hear slightly different takes on what the nodes mean depending on what tradition of astrology you follow, but they generally have an association with flux and change and indicating agitating, unsettling, destabilising or extreme qualities. So the node that the moon is near during an eclipse will add that quality to the tone of the eclipse. Sometimes with an eclipse you'll see that the nodes are in neighbouring signs to where the sun and the moon are, and then that can sometimes bring in the topics from those houses as secondary themes. Another factor to consider is the ruler of the eclipse, i.e. the ruler of the sign that the moon is in at the time of the eclipse. So looking at its general condition at that time can say something about the quality of the eclipse experientially and the potential outcome, how things may unfold. If you find you're getting a bit of astro-anxiety about an upcoming eclipse, or any transits for that matter, it's important to keep in mind that they aren't necessarily directly significant or noticeable in regards to what they indicate for everybody. It really does depend on your individual birth chart. Historically, eclipses have been seen as more significant on a mundane level, affecting rulers, nations and the collective. And of course that can have a direct or indirect effect to a lesser or greater degree on each of us. But in terms of seeing more personally direct changes in your life, and this will depend on a few factors. The main consideration is, do you have planets in the signs where the eclipses are occurring? If so, then an eclipse can be more personally relevant for you, especially if you have those planets within a few degrees of the eclipse degree, and the tighter the orb, the more significant. And so eclipses can stimulate the themes or topics of what that planet signifies or rules in your chart. And also if an eclipse falls on your ascendant, midheaven, IC or descendant, that can be important to note too. And then again, if the eclipse is a total eclipse, that can be more potent and significant than, say, a partial one. Another factor that can be considered is if you were born near to the time of an eclipse, say about a sort of week to maybe 2 weeks maximum, then when eclipses occur, especially the more potent ones, that can indicate a time in life where there are significant turning points for you. So if you have a combination of all of these factors, then an eclipse may be quite significant and quite noticeable and relevant for you. Now, eclipses return to the same sign and degree every 19 years, so reflecting back to a previous eclipse in the same sign and degree might provide some insight as to what kind of things could be arising for you, if you're old enough to remember, of course. Some people experience eclipse energy sort of starting a few weeks before, but the most intense period can be the few weeks or even just a few months following. But eclipses often indicate a process of adjustment or change that plays out or lasts during the time that the eclipses are occurring in the same sign axis, which can be up to a year or 18 months. So it's not always a single significant event that can occur around an eclipse, although it can be that. And sometimes, there may be an event or a situation that arises that perhaps doesn't seem that important at the time, but which you later on recognise to be an important one. You look back and you think, oh yeah, over time that has really turned out to be sort of quite meaningful, quite influential, quite important. It could be a significant turning point for you. So to finish off, I've got an example here to look at just to illustrate some of these factors. And this is the chart of King Charles III of England, the son of Queen Elizabeth II. And I think this is a good example because it shows how the eclipses can indicate the sort of change that can occur relating to the significations of the luminaries themselves and also to the house topics. Of course, not everyone will experience the same thing. This is a very prominent figure. He's going to have certain signatures, that are more relevant for him. But it's still a good example. Now, in Charles's chart, Scorpio falls in his 4th house, the house of parents, home, land, country, and heritage. The 4th house contains his ascendant ruler, the sun. So any transits through this house and to his sun are going to be really important to note for him. Taurus is on his 10th house, the house of public status, reputation, vocation, just what you're known for doing in the world. And this contains his sextile, the moon. So that's another prominent planet in his chart. And it's exalted, so it's a very prominent and favourable position for the moon. It's a strong moon, and it brings in lunar themes to this house of public visibility and actions, such as mother figures and family and the people. So he starts having eclipses across this Taurus-Scorpio sign axis at the end of 2021 with a partial eclipse in November. So you can think of this as the kind of potential starting period of a process of change related to these signs and house topics that could play out for him over the next sort of year to 18 months. And I think this is exactly what we see happening. What's notable is that in 2022, Queen Elizabeth starts to cancel a lot of her engagements due to health issues. On May the 16th, 2022, there's a total lunar eclipse at 25 degrees Scorpio in his 4th house, and it's in a tight conjunction to his ascendant ruler, the sun, a significant planet in his chart. So this would suggest some significant turning points and shifts on the horizon relating to his own sense of self, his identity, and in relation to the home, parents, or heritage. And it's in September 2022, just a few months after this notable total eclipse near his sun, that Queen Elizabeth, his mother, dies, which means he becomes King of England. The eclipses across this axis continue in October and November 2022, shifting between Scorpio and Taurus. The eclipses begin to shift into the Aries-Libra axis in 2023, but there are still a couple more eclipses across this Scorpio-Taurus axis in that year. Whilst he's proclaimed king in September 2022, he has his formal public coronation in May 2023. And you can imagine that whilst plans were being made years before to prepare him for this time, this is still quite a profound change for him. He's lost his mother, which itself is a significant and difficult time for anybody. And at the same time, he's having to step into a new and very prominent role, adapting and adjusting to changes to his public role, his 10th house, which is strongly tied to and identified with his family and his heritage and country, the 4th house. So we can see the topics of the houses coming through relating to home, family, public life and career, which are also indicated through the sun and the moon significations themselves, representing rulership, women leaders, mother and family. So I hope that gives you some idea, a little taster of how eclipses work in astrology, and I hope you found it helpful. If you have any comments or questions, or if you'd like to share your own eclipse experiences, please do leave them below, or like and subscribe to the channel. I'd love to hear from you. Till next time, bye for now.